Ready or not, Bronco Nation, here comes game day. I know most of us are still trying to come to terms with what happened last week. However, the season waits for no man, and Boise State will be playing Eastern Washington this Friday, another earlier in the week game at 7 p.m. Mountain Time on FS1. Boise State favored in this game against Eastern Washington, who lost their own opening matchup against Incarnate Word. Boise State favored 93.5% chance of winning per ESPN. Now, again, this game is tough to come so quickly when we're still all trying to get over what happened last week, and I think that's a good thing. An opportunity to catch us in our moment of down and bring us back to a semblance here of reality and expectations moving forward with the rest of the season. And that is what this game is about. This is no longer just an easy week 2 opening game match or opening home game matchup versus an FCS opponent. A lot of times FCS games are seen as almost like active bye weeks, scrimmage opportunity almost against a real opponent. That's not what this FCS game is about. This is now Boise State's needed opportunity to come back together, gel as a team after all of the expectations and hype and momentum of the offseason came crashing down last Thursday. This is their time to show that the program is going to continue to move forward. There is so much riding on this game. How do the players recover from what happened last week? How do the coaches? It was a bad game from the coaches all the way down to the players. Everyone shares blame in what happens. I know the coaches get up there and they say, this is on me, this is on me, this is on me. And I know a lot of people are not happy with Spencer Danielson's positive attitude on the sidelines, but I want the fan base to be very, very clear here to understand that just because Spencer Danielson is smiling and encouraging on the sidelines doesn't mean that he's not taking this seriously, and it doesn't mean that what we see off camera, he is not coming down and making sure the players know that mistakes made are not okay and how to recover. There's a saying, right? It's praise in public, discipline in private. You want the players to know that publicly, in front of the cameras, in front of everybody, you have their back. And you have their back when the cameras are off too, but you also are going to let them know those things that are a little bit harder to share in front of everybody else that you keep internal to your organization. Those kind of things don't need to be in front of the cameras. And I know when the game is going poorly and you're upset as a fan and your emotions are high and your anger is high, you want to see the person that made that mistake share a little bit of that anger, get a little bit of the justice that you feel is needed in the moment. And I think I agree with Spencer Danielson's approach here. Let the players know in the moment, shake it off, move on to the next one, know your coach has your back, and then when it's film session, when you're training during the off week, or during the rest of the week coming into the game, that is when you're going to come down and be a little bit more severe in the moment of, hey, this is how we build going forward. So I just want that to be very clear. I don't have any inside knowledge of Spencer Danielson, but when I see reactions on Facebook or Twitter or whatever saying Spencer Danielson doesn't take this seriously, that I believe is 100% false. So this is his opportunity to show that he is taking this seriously, an opportunity for the players to show when adversity hits how, as a young program, right? This is a young coaching staff with a lot of players who were part of the Ashton Jeanty golden moment of last year, but are still struggling to find their own sense of who they are without Jeanty, without everything that Avalos did to this program for so many years. How do they come together after adversity, the first time they've really truly experienced it? How do they come together after adversity and move forward? And we'll find out on Friday. No, that's a long intro, long warm-up into the video, but we're going to go through the keys to the game here. We're going to look at the series history between both Boise State and Eastern Washington, key players for Boise State and Eastern Washington. So if there's any Eastern Washington fans that are watching, there'll be some stuff in here for you as well. And then we'll end with a summary and a score prediction. And that brings me to the score prediction challenge, my favorite part of every single video, getting that opportunity to go down in the comments with all of you and to get to discuss this game. So pause the video right now, go into the comments below and put your score prediction for this game. Your score prediction, your honest score prediction. This is all part of the score prediction challenge. The winner of the score prediction challenge will be entered into a raffle for the end of the season to earn a Ashton Jeanty Boise State jersey. So please go in the comments below, put your score prediction. If there's somebody else that has the same score prediction, that's okay. If multiple people get the exact same score right, they will all win. They'll all get a shout out in the next video, and they'll all be entered in the raffle. It's only when nobody gets to score right that I just go with either who is the closest, or if there's multiple people with the same score, whoever put their score prediction in first. So again, pause the video right now, go in the comments below, and give me your score predictions. All right, everybody back. Let's move forward with the video. Again, score predictions, any thoughts you have on the video either now or throughout, I want to hear those, and I'm going to have those conversations with each and every one of you. It's why I do the channel, so I can have that interaction with Bronco Nation. All right, so let's compare these two teams. This is the battle of the colored turfs. You've got the blue turf of Boise State versus the horrendous red inferno of Eastern Washington. Boise State versus Eastern Washington actually do have a series that they have played. Now, they haven't played for a very long time, but they do actually have a history between them. Boise State leads that series 13-6. The first game was played in 1968. Boise State winning that game 20-0 on the blue. Eastern Washington got their last win in the series in 1996 when Boise State was a brand new FBS program. Game that went early in the FBS years. 21-27 also on the blue as a blue home loss for Boise State. And then Boise State, the last game in the series was a convincing Boise State win in 2000. Boise State winning that game 41-23. Now, if they want this game to be a convincing win, there's going to be some key players for Boise State here. They're going to step up, but not just step up in making this a convincing win, but if Boise State wants to have a strong season, these players need to use this game to basically start 0-0, come into this matchup, and reform and re-gel to build on some form of platform that they can use for the rest of the year. That starts with Maddox Madsen. We knew that without Ashton Jeanty, Maddox Madsen was going to be the focal point of this offense. Can he move from game manager, where he's simply not making mistakes so that Ashton Jeanty can do what he does and take over the plays in an explosive run game, moving from that to now he needs to not make mistakes, obviously, but he also needs to be the one that makes the explosive plays. He needs to be not just a game manager, but a playmaker. And the question asked, can he move into that role? At least in game one, it's uncertain. He certainly did not throughout the game. He had some moments. I think when he was allowed to get out and run, I think there was some, there's nobody behind him. I know some people are calling it, as always, to replace Maddox Madsen. It seems to be the chant since he's played at Boise State, but there is literally nobody behind him that has any kind of consistency with this team, would be able to do anything better than Maddox Madsen. Certainly don't have the ceiling that he has if he's able to perform at the level that we've seen. So I know that were a lot of people calling for that, but there is nobody behind him. So with that, I understand the coaching staff is hesitant to allow him to use his legs. It's not a key to the game, but for Maddox Madsen, he needs to use everything in his arsenal as a playmaker, because Boise State is dead in the water without him. You can't have a partial product of Maddox Madsen and be successful. You have to let him be everything that he is, with everything that comes with. Some risky throws, yes. Potential for injury, yes. But that's also part of being a playmaker. High risk, high reward. You don't become an explosive playmaker by playing it safe. And it felt very much in the USF game like Maddox Madsen was playing it safe. Like he was uncertain, like he was hesitant, didn't want to risk those big throws, didn't want to risk going out and running until in the second half when game was over, basically, and he just had to do what he had to do. He is an effective playmaker when he uses all of his arsenal. We need to see that. Even though it's an FCS team, don't want to get hurt versus an FCS opponent, but he needs to build some confidence in this game. That comes from showing everything that he has on the table. Last week, 25 for 46, 225 yards, passing 54.3%, completion percentage, 1 touchdown, 0 interceptions, and 2 fumbles. But also effective on the ground when he was able to run. Now, Maddox Madsen, who's he throwing to? Well, we thought it was going to be Matt Lauder, and he was one of my key players last week. Didn't really materialize, and he still is going to be a huge part of this offense. He certainly is, but I think that everybody knows that Matt Lauder is the focus. Somebody has to draw some additional heat out of the way for Matt Lauder to be able to open him up, and I think that comes from Latrell Caples. Latrell Caples is your leader on this offense. He is the most experienced leader for Boise State, really on the team, but especially on this offense. He's a fifth-year senior, fifth-year senior for Boise State, and he seemed to be very underutilized last week. Only 4 receptions for 58 yards. Somebody has to take over and help become that explosive threat that Maddox Madsen can target. I think Latrell Caples has that capability, but I also think that as a leader, if he starts to catch fire, the rest of the team will come behind that. So I want to see Latrell Caples have a really big game in this to, again, build something for the rest of the season. And then finally, the defense, Boise State, Marco Notriani. He is the captain back there now. He is the I believe he is wearing the green dot helmet, and he is also the player that has the highest level of awareness on the field. You lost Tubner, and now that responsibility is coming down to Marco Notarianni. When you talk about a defense that struggled to be consistent as a unit, many broken deep passes allowed, broken tackles, just a complete lack of fundamentals and focus. When you're talking about all of that, the way that you fix that is with a strong leader who brings the team together, and that's Marco Notarianni. 7 tackles last week. He had a pretty good game, but he has the capability to be much better, and I think the team needs him, just like Latrell Caples, to step up into that role to bring the offense together. Marco Notarianni needs to step up in the same way in the defense and gel and bring this unit. And all of these players, Maddox Madison, Latrell Caples, and Marco Notarianni, I believe, are key in the locker room and on the field to refocusing this team and making sure they move through this adversity and come out stronger on the other side. Now, for Eastern Washington, I'm going to be honest, I haven't seen any of their games this year. I didn't see any of their games last year. I don't watch FCS football, so I'm sure that there may be a comment or something saying that, oh, it's actually this guy on the team is better. That's fine. But when I was reviewing their game last week against Incarnate Word, who, by the way, is a pretty good FCS team, had over 11 wins, 11-3 record last season. And yes, a loss by Eastern Washington, opening up 21-31 versus Incarnate Word. However, that is a good FCS team. So this could still be a better Eastern Washington team than some are thinking coming into this matchup. But looking through that game, some of the players that stood out to me, just going kind of a quarterback, running back, and a defensive end here. Their quarterback, Jared Taylor, 6 foot 205, definitely a running threat, had over 700 yards rushing last season. In the game last week, 21 for 38, 183 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions, but he did have 36 yards rushing on the ground and a touchdown as well. So Boise State, heavily burned by Byron Brown last week of USF. Taylor, they could have an opportunity to exploit some of that weakness and vulnerability, especially when you start getting past that initial defensive line. I thought that for Boise State, not so much their front seven, because I thought there was some inconsistency at linebacker, but the D-line played really well. It was once the quarterback got outside of the defensive line, that is when you saw a lot of the broken tackles and missed assignments. So this potentially, for Eastern Washington, they're going to need Taylor to step up if they want to have a chance in this matchup. Now, who is that augmentation to Taylor? Who is he looking at, both as a support in the offense from the run game perspective, but also in the passing game? It's going to be, and I'm going to probably mess up his name, so any Eastern Washington fans, I do apologize, but Yetz Marquise, 5'8", 175, not a huge back, but very much a speedster threat. 6 carries for 59 yards, 2 touchdowns, 9.8 yard average versus Incarnate Word. And then he also had 7 receptions for 63 yards. He led the team in rushing and in receiving, so close to 60 yards in both of those, and he had 2 touchdowns on the ground. So definitely a threat, and somebody that if you're bringing a lot of pressure and you're playing a little bit on a bigger stage on the blue, I'd expect him to be a heavy target for Taylor next on Friday. And then defensively, for them, I'm most worried about Tylen Jackson, 6'5", 260, redshirt sophomore defensive end. He looks the part. He looks like a very, very good football player. 5 tackles last week, 2 tackles for loss, and a sack. One of only 2 players on the team that had a sack last week versus Incarnate Word. So it's somebody that on offensive line that struggled last week. They did. The pass protection was not terrible, but especially in the run game, they struggled to be consistent up front. This is a player that's going to try and exploit some of those vulnerabilities, maybe get matched up against against favorable matchups on the offensive line. There are some vulnerabilities there, especially when you're looking at some of the players that had to step in and replace the right tackle position. Is a place that Boise State was not consistent at last week. Potentially an opportunity for Tylen Jackson here to have an impact. So keys to the game for Boise State. How do they go out and not just win? Because I don't think that's necessarily the biggest concern. I'm going to tell you right off the bat, I am predicting a win. I'll tell my score prediction at the end. I think Boise State's going to go out and win this, but it's not just about winning this game. These keys to the game are, yes, what you need to do to win this matchup, but they're also what you need to do to establish something for the rest of the season. How do you fix so many problems? And I know that people are throwing out all kinds of statistics to try and make the loss at Boise State not seem so bad. It was bad. No matter what stats you throw at this, I've watched that game twice now. I watched it live, and then I went back and before this video watched it again. I made a little short highlight reel of all the top players, the good plays for Boise State. You can find that on the channel if you're interested in trying to relive that from maybe a more positive point of view. But I've watched that game twice now, and yes, Boise State had some moments, but they time and time and time again shot themselves in the foot, and mostly due to a lack of fundamentals. It really never felt like Boise State was in that game because you never felt like they were going to be consistent, whether again from the play calling on fourth down decisions to the actual play on the field. Just a lack of discipline and fundamentals, multiple missed tackles in the first half. Part of the reason it was so close is because USF was killing themselves with holding penalties that took out, say, a 9-tackle broken run by Byron Brown where he just pinballs off of players into the end zone. Boise State, multiple missed tackles, unsportsmanlike conduct penalties, obviously on Banks with the throwing the quarterback down, missed blocks and holes by the running backs and the offensive line, so missed blocks, offensive line players getting through, but also by the running backs, too much dancing around, not taking the open lane or being decisive with it. There were multiple times where Boise State took a tackle for loss where they could probably have taken at least a 2-yard, very worst case scenario, negation, zero, no yard loss, but bouncing around, trying to see if they can bounce outside versus just plowing up whatever is open and taking that open. There's a mentality of, okay, being a patient back and finding the opening. But you have to also know when you need to just plug ahead and take whatever's given to you and make the best of a worse situation. And when you have penetration in the backfield and it's not opening up, that is the time to just take whatever's there and plow up ahead and not let them hit you first. So Boise State on sportsmanlike conduct penalties, missed blocks and holes, running backs dancing, players jogging was a big point of emphasis. Madison missing wide open wide receivers, especially on that bad fourth down decision to go for it by the coaching staff at the 22 instead of kicking a field goal to make it a 7-point game. Bad decision, but having made the decision, there were, you could argue, 4 open receivers. I posted it on Twitter as an image that will live for the rest of my life in my head. 4 open wide receivers. You have Caples running the middle of the field, nobody around him. You have Ford with a couple players closing in, but theoretically open. You have Chris Marshall on the far left side, who is also open, a little bit of a longer pass, but open. And then Sire Gaines, who he eventually went to, was open the entire play, and then he overthrows him. And so all of that, and then of course the fumbles, all of that points to a lack of discipline and fundamentals. When I say that this was the worst loss I've ever watched from a Boise State team, it doesn't mean it's the worst game I've seen, worst loss result that I've seen, as in margin of loss or just impact of the loss. But I talk about performance. This was the worst performance by a Boise State team, and it came down to the lack of discipline and fundamentals. And I think fundamentally, the team felt really good about themselves. You come off of a CFP performance the week before, but the season before. There's a lot. You're the only team in the top 25. There's so much positive energy, momentum. You don't have that expediency driving you during practice the same way as you do when, say, you're coming off of one of the worst seasons in school history, and now you have a brand new coach and you're trying to prove and win for him. I just don't think that this team coming through spring and fall at a subconscious level, I'm sure consciously there was an effort to put in that focus and expediency to come out on the field and put out the best product. But I just don't think subconsciously that drive was there. Again, not in the same way as a team that was coming off of a disappointing season would. You think about what happened to Boise State in 2008. They come off of that disappointing loss to TCU. Very, very close game in the Poinsettia Bowl. Feel like they should have been somewhere else. And, undefeated regular season. That game, even though it was a pretty good season, that game drove them to do what they did in 2009 and 2010, even though it was a disappointing one game, but overall great. And even in 2011, that game transformed the golden era of what we saw out of Boise State during the Kellen Moore golden era. It was still a pretty good team throughout 2008, but they became some of the best teams college football has ever seen 2009 2011 because of that 2% better mentality and drive from 2008 season. That didn't happen. Boise State got to the CFP. They lost in the CFP. They wanted to win the CFP, but they were also very much outmatched. There was a lot of other things going on as far as time between game. The first 2 drives between the end of season and the start of the game, the first 2 drives, they were rusty. Boise State played pretty well overall. It was a good season, especially when you're coming off of all the Avalos years beforehand. And I just don't think that Boise State came into this season with that drive and that subconscious determination to not accept any mistakes and make sure that you make up for any errors doubly and do better in every single play. I just don't think that was there. That's there now. They've had that opportunity. They have had an opportunity this week on somewhat of a short week to do what they should have done all of the offseason, and it's going to have to come out in this game. Because this is an FCS team, it's a little bit of a live scrimmage opportunity to practice those fundamentals, but more than that, this is an opportunity to restart your season, and it starts with going back to those basics, basic tackling, basic ball control, basic lane assignment, basic blocking. All of that starts in this game, and this is, I wish this had been the first game of the season. I think that Boise State would have gotten a little bit of a wake-up call if that had happened. They would have won, but gotten a little bit of, oh, that was scary, and come in better to USF. You can't change how things have gone, so Boise State just has to take the best of what's left and move forward. Now, second key of the game for Boise State, offensive line needs to gel. I think that the main reason for Boise State's loss was the inability to establish an effective running game. And even when you were running, obviously there were fumbles, but Boise State struggled to be effective up front, putting so much of the burden onto Madsen. He expected to have to be the playmaker. He didn't expect to have to be really the only playmaker for Boise State. The offensive line on paper should be one of the best offensive lines in the country, certainly in the conference, and they did not look like that at all. And the reason I think that is an offensive line is a unit. Over the offseason, I got a little bit of heat because I ranked the top players on impact if they transferred. Most important players, not units, but players on a roster. And I had the offensive line pretty low on that list, and I got a lot of heat for that because obviously the offensive line is very important, and there are some very, very important positions, like having a very good left tackle type of thing, that do impact the team overall. But the thing with the offensive line is it doesn't matter if you have 4 NFL guys. If you have one player who's not at least, doesn't have to be as good as every player, but isn't on the same mindset as everyone else, the offensive line is going to fail. It just takes one weak spot for the offensive line to come apart, because either that is going to be a vulnerability that comes through, or the other players are going to have to start compensating for that weak moment, or knowing subconsciously that area is not defended and they're not going to be effectively monitoring their assignments on the offensive line. It just takes one. You have to have all 5 guys on the same page. They don't all have to be NFL level players, but they all have to be working as one unit. If that doesn't happen, you see what happened versus USF. And this is not an attempt to attack in any way the Dalen Meteor on the offensive line. I have a lot of respect for what he did last season, stepping up. I think he has a ton of potential, but I also think it's what you expect to see from a first time in a big game environment as the primary starter on that offensive line. I think it was underestimated what a big impact that was going to be. So for Boise State, this game, it's the opportunity now for that unit as a whole to gel together, for that unit to come together in this matchup, to come together and build some positive momentum. It's going to be a little bit easier. You should outweigh the opposition on the other side. You're just the higher level recruits. This is not the same as going up against a equally ranked group of 5 team or a power 4 where the rosters are either more superior or matched. Boise State on paper far outmatches Eastern Washington, especially at the line. So for Boise State, this is that opportunity to build that consistency and that confidence, primarily in the running game. I thought the passing game was pretty good. There were some moments it could be worked on. There were certainly some times Max Madsen was under pressure. Overall, though, he had time. That wasn't the problem. It was a lack of creativity from the passing game that didn't give him opportunities to actually find those open holes. The run game was the area Boise State struggled. This is that opportunity to establish that. Potter said he wants to be a run-first offense. Okay, this is that chance to establish it and get the entire unit working as a unit. It has to be fixed early in the season because Boise State is now working with a win-every-game mentality. They don't have any other opportunities for error. Maybe some potentiality in the Notre Dame game, but even theoretically, they need to win that one as well. Boise State has to fix their issues in this game, and when you leave from the fundamentals, the biggest focus then is the offensive line. Now, key number 3 for Boise State, establish team identity on offense. Again, you don't have Genty, so who is this team? Who carries this team? Again, in last week, it wasn't Madsen, it wasn't Louder, it wasn't Gaines, it wasn't any of these, it wasn't Chris Marshall, it wasn't any of these players we thought were going to step up and lead this team. Somebody has to take over as the playmaker. Max Madsen has that capability. Cyrus Gaines has that capability if he can get the ball. Chris Marshall has that capability if he can be consistent. If he cannot get bumped off of his route and that throw off all of the timing and he's not able to recover. If Matt Louder can find the open lanes and Max Madsen can find Matt Louder. all of these players have an opportunity to step up. And somebody needs to. This needs to be an opportunity where leaders step up on the game and say, I'm going to take over on the field, and we're going to work as a team, but I'm going to carry that team. Boise State needs to find who are those playmakers. When the chips are down, who does Maddox Madsen look to on a 3rd and 8? And who does he know is going to be open because they've established that confidence? Who is going to step up in the running back room? Malik Sherrod or Sire Gaines? Who is going to be able to take over when the blocks aren't there and still drive out and get that 1, 2, 8, 30, 40 yards that Boise State needs? Who is going to do that? Same obviously on defense, but primarily for this team is establish some form of identity that isn't Genty because he's gone. Who establishes that? And part of that is also what is the offensive style? Because what Potter seemed to be running was very similar to the offense that Boise State ran last year. That offense does not work without Genty, and it doesn't work with the players that Boise State has. They have a quarterback who is good in many areas, but he doesn't have a cannon for an arm. He just doesn't. He doesn't have a pro-style arm. Maddox Madsen is not going to go play professional football. He is strong in a lot of areas. If he is used effectively on this offense, he can be a very good quarterback. But he needs some other diversions for the defense to open up opportunities. Boise State doesn't have a senior wide receiver core that can just beat their guy in front of them and go make a play. They just don't. Besides Latrell Caples, he's the only player who really has experience, and he has been injured for most of his career. Okay, Boise State doesn't have a Titus Young or Austin Pettis or Khalil Shakir or Hightower or Cedric Wilson Jr. They don't have one of those, at least not yet. That's part of, again, somebody establishing identity. Somebody needs to step up and be that player. But also, while you can't just wait for that player to arise, you have to structure your offense in a way that gives them those opportunities. Boise State's offense, the way that they are running it, with the formation they come out on is the formation they run at you. They might have one, maybe in some cases 2 shifts or motions, but it's not the norm. And if they're shifting, that player's usually involved in the play. When I was watching the replay, most times they shifted, that Maddox Madsen stared down that receiver and the ball went his way. Boise State needs to come back to that creativity. I'm not saying it has to be a trick play palooza, but Boise State needs to go back to the window dressing shifts. Remember when Boise State used to line up in the champagne formation with the 3 wide receivers on the right side, and then they'd spin, rotate, come back to a more of a double tight end type look for a power run game, or they'd shift out of that to 2 slot receivers on one end and wide. Boise State used to give you so many different things to look at as a defense. You never knew what they were going to come out and hit you with, and that opened up opportunities. Now I think those other teams also had some better skill position level players in terms of experience and proven potential, but at the same time, those teams allowed their offense to be the most effective with the playmakers that they had because they gave you so many looks. But yes, versus an FCS team, you can go out and beat them running the offense you ran versus USF. If you don't make all of the fumbles and mistakes, you can go out and beat them. Most of the teams in Mountain West, you can probably beat them and maybe close with the offense you're running. But if you truly want to be competitive at the highest level, be able to beat anybody, anytime, any place, you need to run an offensive system that takes into account the players you have, not the players you want or the players you want them to be. And this type of system that we saw ran really between 2006 and 2019, that kind of offense is what Boise State needs on this field. That gives players so many different things that they have to look at on the defensive side and makes up for some lack of up top busting capability, to over the top playmaker type capability that is just at this point missing. But those type of offensive play style will give those players an opportunity to rise that level, build that confidence, build that chemistry, and be able to become those players for you for Boise State's offense. And guess who on the offense knows exactly how to run that style of offense? Zach Hill. He was offensive coordinator for Boise State between 2017 and 2019. He ran that offense at Boise State. You go back and watch those plays. It's a very, very effective offense for Boise State. Boise State's offense was very explosive, very exciting to watch. That is what Boise State needs on the field the rest of the season Dirk Cutter was exactly what we needed in the moment. He was a perfect offensive coordinator when we had Ashton Genty. And when in 2022, when he stepped up into the role and did what Andy Avalos wanted as far as a more traditional conservative offense that was very run focused, he was perfect for that. He is very, very good at establishing a team, building that baseline fundamentals, and becoming a program that is going to be very, very consistent throughout. He's very good at that. And he did incredible things for Boise State as far as establishing them early on when they were an FCS team and they needed to work on building a reliable base that other offensive coordinators during the Hawk, Harsin, and Chris Peterson era, Hawk, Chris Peterson, and Harsin era, who were maybe a little more willing to push the envelope of what should be done and be a little bit more creative, were able to use that base of culture that Dirk Cutter had established, that blue-collar mentality that Dirk Cutter had helped build up here and establish at Boise State. I know it existed before, but really helped establish that focus on fundamentals at Boise State. He was able to do that, which then allowed other offensive coordinators to be more exciting, be more explosive down the line. I went on Twitter and Facebook because fans are saying, bring Dirk Cutter back. We don't need Dirk Cutter back, and I don't think his offensive style would work with this offense. He's very much of a pro-style type of offense. It doesn't work when you don't have a great running back, a proven running back, which we don't have right now. Sour Gaines, Malik Sherrod have a lot of potential, a lot of capability, but both of them are coming off of injuries. Sour Gaines is a very inexperienced running back, very young running back coming off of injury. Malik Sherrod, very much more experienced, a little bit less excusable as far as mistakes that he's making, especially when it comes to picking the right and open lane. There's one point that the middle was completely wide open, and instead he broke it outside, ended up in a 2-yard loss versus what could have been a touchdown. That's a little bit more inexcusable, but he's also a running back who's transitioning to a new program and was injured all of last year, and so he's knocking off some rust. When you don't have that proven next level in terms of reliability and proven potential running back in the backfield, and you don't have wide receivers that can consistently get open against simple coverage, or a quarterback who can consistently find those players. Max Matson is very good in a lot of areas, but he doesn't have an arm that can reach everywhere on the field. He just doesn't. And he also doesn't have the quick throw capability. He's accurate when he needs to be, and he's very good with his awareness. And if you give him the right offense, he can be very effective with that offense. But he's not a player that's just going to line up and, again, do that kind of one-on-one, beat you one-on-one down the field, throwing that ball in a way that is simple one-on-one wide receiver who is equally matched and maybe not quite equally matched versus a defender is going to go up and be able to make that play. That's not Max Matson's strength. What he would be very strong at is running a more complex offensive system that utilizes a variety of formations, gives him some ability to change based on what he's seeing from the defense, use the cerebral side. His game awareness is supposed to be elite. Be able to use that game awareness to implement an offense that fits his strengths and the strengths of this team. That's what Boise State needs to do right now. So 3 keys to the game: back to the basics, offensive line needs to gel, and establish team identity on offense, preferably one with more creativity and window dressing, so the defense has to consider those options as well. So summarizing this game, I went into it pretty in-depth at the beginning. This is a really important game for Boise State, maybe one of the more important games in their history. I mean, it's weird to say when you're playing an FCS team, but Boise State is anchorless right now. They are adrift in a sea of negativity and even in uncertainty. I mean, this is a team that we are going to win the playoffs on their wall, on their team room. That is their goal. Go and win a playoff game. And they open up like that versus USF. How do you refocus a team when that goal seems almost out of reach and certainly not entirely within your control? How do you go out and refocus a team to still go out and put a superior product on the field? How do you do that? How do you prove to a team that they are a team that can win and they're not just a team that won because of a Heisman level player? And that's not been proven yet. How do you do that? And that is what's going to have to be shown on the field. That is the task that's been set before the coaches. Again, besides 2023, which the season was over anyway, and it was like, the new head coach, go out there and have fun. I mean, that was adversity. They had to overcome that. All the players I've talked to on my channel who have lived through that, one of the most meaningful moments in their lives was how they overcame adversity. I'm not belittling that at all, but it's different. It's different when you have a full season with a head coach and you have to work through adversity. They didn't have to work through adversity. Even their one loss in the regular season was really a win in a lot of ways. They went out when nobody expected them to and went toe-to-toe with one of the best teams in the country. They could have won that game, and they should have won that game. That's not the same as adversity. They had to work through some tough games. They won all of them. They went to the playoffs when nobody expected them to coming into the season, and they went and they won. Not won, sorry, when they lost, but in a way, again, they won because they had a pretty good showing overall, and they ended the season in the playoffs after 2023. That's not adversity. This is adversity. I think that coming through this moment, if they are able to be successful, if the coaches are able to be the coaches that they were in 2023, that we thought that we know that they are, if they are able to fulfill the confidence in the athletic director's staff when they chose these coaches to lead this program and these players, even when you have lost some of your main leaders offensively and defensively, when the players are able, if they are able to step up and replicate that recovery and resiliency capability of the previous teams, the 2023 leaders, if they're able to do that and move forward through it this season and even into next season, this is going to go down as one of those moments that players look back on. How did we come together as a unit after the USF game? How did we find new confidence? How did guys step up and say, this is not acceptable, we're going to change? How did the coaches rally us? How did our leaders in the team rally us? That is what is at stake in this game versus Eastern Washington. It is not as simple as just going out and playing a home opener versus Eastern Washington. In many ways, the future of the program hangs on the thread of this game, how the team moves forward and recovers. Not whether they win or lose, but how do they do that? How do they win this game? And what do they show on the field? Are they able to implement short moment fixes that should have been done over the offseason but weren't? How can you identify problems and fix them in such a short span of time and move forward the rest of the season? All of that rests on this game. So for Boise State versus Eastern Washington, this is a massive game for Boise State. It's, again, not an opponent you would expect me to say that against, but based on what we saw versus USF, this is a massive game. My score prediction for this game, Boise State 42 versus Eastern Washington 13. I do expect Boise State to come out better in this one. I think there's still going to be some issues. I think that there may be issues that don't get fully revealed because it is a weaker opponent, and Boise State needs to be aware of that and keeping an eye out for all of the details and not accepting any form of mistakes in this game. Again, not saying that special teams needs to be screaming at players on the sideline, but taking those notes and addressing them, not accepting any form of mistakes in this game, even if those mistakes end in a good result. The ends do not justify the means in this matchup because the actual process of getting to that end may be a little bit easier because of the opponent and may hide some mistakes that otherwise would raise their head versus, say, maybe an Air Force when we have to play them in a couple of weeks. So for Boise State, huge moment for the team, huge moment for the coaches, and huge moment for the players, and huge moment for Bronco Nation. Bronco Nation, right? We thought that these feelings were done, that we were back, that the golden era of Boise State was back, and it still can be. The golden era of Boise State didn't end in 2005. When Boise State had all those incredible seasons coming up to 2005, all those undefeated regular seasons coming up to 2005, and then 2005 happened, it wasn't the end of the season, it was the beginning. And then 2006 and everything else that happened after it happened because of how the team reacted and built on the 2005 season. Bronco Nation, come behind this team on Friday. It's a sold-out game. You need to be bringing that energy and that level to inspire these players and build up this team so that they can have not a 2005-like season. Hopefully they recover and are better than that, but they can have that same effect, the same effect that coming off of the 2008 season had. Use this year with still so much opportunity. They can still get to the playoffs, but beyond that, this isn't just about this season. This is about how does this team build going forward into next year and the year after that. Without Andy Avalos, with a new head coach, can Boise State reestablish the golden era, the high expectations, the top 25s, and being the team that's always competing at the top level? Can they do that? It starts on Friday. It starts with his team. It starts with his coaching staff. And it starts with you, Bronco Nation. Come out, be loud, support this team, and let's go out and get that win. So thanks so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Please give me your score prediction. If you haven't already, you've already heard mine, but that's okay. You can go through and put it anyway. I won't know. Give me your score prediction. Give me your own predictions for this game. Any other thoughts that you have on this matchup. I want to discuss all those in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. Sorry this one went a little bit long, but I think there was a lot more to talk about than a normal game preview. As always, make sure you like, subscribe, and go Big Blue!